This episode of the Topcast is proudly supported by Alfred Music. You're listening to the Topcast, the original podcast for growth-minded instrumental music and voice teachers since 2015, with your host, Tim Topham. Our mission at Top Music is to empower instrumental music and voice teachers to find and nurture their innate creativity so that they can teach lessons that are innovative, integrated, and inspiring, and that will have a positive, lifelong impact on their students. Join us each week as we interview teachers and creators from around the world and unpack fun and exciting ideas to maximize your teaching and studio business success. Well, welcome back to the Topcast, teachers. It's great to have you with us again for another episode. I hope you're doing well. And for those of you over in the Northern Hemisphere, I hope you're enjoying your summer break. Perhaps you're listening to this from a beach or a hammock with a margarita. I can only dream. Nice and cold down here in Melbourne, Australia. But whatever you're doing, wherever you are, thanks so much for tuning in. It's great to be able to hang out with you again today. As we know, most instrumental teachers working from home naturally have to teach after school hours in that limited window between 3 to 7 p.m. on weekdays and sometimes on weekends as well. Because this can really impact our own social and family lives, any opportunities to teach outside these windows can be seen almost as a bit of a holy grail for private music instruction. And one of the most coveted options for daytime teaching, if you're not teaching in a school environment, is homeschoolers. But is teaching homeschoolers really all it's cracked up to be? Well, in today's episode, I'm speaking to a homeschool mum herself, Ginny Thorpe, about how the system works and what opportunities there are for teachers for these students. And we're going to break some myths and learn a whole lot. I learned so much in this interview. I think you will do the same as well. There are lots of opportunities out there. But importantly, we'll also cover how to break into this market if you're not a homeschool parent yourself, which can be a bit of a challenge. Ginny's experience teaching piano as a teen led to a passion for music education. After degrees and several years of classroom teaching, she adjusted her career to accommodate her growing family. Her journey has led her to a unique approach to education, blending passion, creativity, and dedication to spread the joy of music far and wide. While piano remains her primary instrument, she teaches a variety from violin to ukulele to bass recorder, embracing the diversity of musical expression. The saying, variety is the spice of life, is reflected in her teaching approach, which has evolved to include group lessons, jam sessions, songwriting classes, and multi-age, multi-level, and multi-instrument instruction. Ginny's dedication to music education is not just a profession, but a lifelong mission. Her impact extends far beyond the notes on a page, as she seeks to enrich the lives of her students and her community with the transformative power of music. Welcome to the show, Ginny. It's so great to meet you.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, I found out about your work back in June, actually, when you shared a very cool presentation about homeschoolers. And you got me thinking, because I'm always asked these questions on social media, and particularly from our membership group, about homeschoolers sound like the coolest group of people. How do I find them? How do I break into this market? So before we get into that, can you tell us just a little bit about you and your teaching at the moment?
Sure. I have 5 kids, so I have been full-time mom plus part-time teaching for a while. I have my degree in music education from Westchester University here in Pennsylvania. And I also have my master's in music ed with a CoDi certification. So CoDi is kind of my jam, although with some stipulations, there's some changes that I make and how I have kind of modified it for my purposes over the years. So I have a studio here in my home, and I teach anywhere from 10 to 25 students right now there. And then I teach, this past year, I taught 2 days at 2 different homeschool co-ops. So it was pretty much full. Those days were full days. So the 25 students I fit on the other days. This year, I am shifting things a little bit. I'm getting into a little bit more teacher writing curriculum for teachers and helping teachers, things like that.
Brilliant. And listeners will hear more about co-ops and what that actually means a little bit later. I think we'll get to that. But I also understand you've tried quite a few different types of teaching for your own 5 kids.
So the co-ops, that's been kind of a standard. I'm the music teacher there, and that's actually my philosophy for that is basically if my kids are benefiting from it, I give 100%, 200%. So they've been there, all of my children in one time or another. And this is actually the first year that I'm not going to have any children there. So therefore, I have stepped back from teaching there. But so I was their music teacher in a quote classroom setting, even though it was not your typical classroom. And then they've done some private lessons. And then with instructors other than me, I've tried teaching my own kids. I've done with varying degrees of success. I went through a phase with my one daughter who's now 18 where I was like, okay, I got to not be mom in the piano studio. So I kept a clown wig in my piano bench and would don the wig for piano lessons. So I'm like, I'm not mom. So just, anything to try to get out of that like mom and child mode. And then I often teach group lessons. This has been the most enjoyable. As my kids got older, I sought ways to try to get them engaged and wanting to play music. And my friends would send their kids to me to teach them. And so I was like, I wonder if I do classes and my kids' friends come to the classes, then my kids will take the classes and then they'll learn music with their friends. So that kind of is what got me going with group lessons. So it was a way of kind of coaxing or bribing, whatever, my children to do music lessons with their friends. And then it grew and snowballed from there.
I love how flexible you are with the approach. You've tried lots of different things and it keeps evolving and changing, which I think is really valuable because it actually keeps you fresh and means you're not going to get stale or bored or anything like that. And I think I'm right in thinking that you've homeschooled your children. You've also sent your children to co-ops. You've also sent them to regular high schools and elementary schools. So is that correct? You've got quite an experience.
We've done a little bit of everything. We did a private school for a year with our firstborn for kindergarten. And then we were like, you know what? He was the oldest, and it just didn't feel right for our family to send him off to school all day, every day when everybody else was still at home and developing a family culture and doing so many things together. So we decided to send him to a local, I didn't know the term at the time, but now they would classify it as a micro school. So it's basically a woman who has a one-room schoolhouse in her basement. She has been doing this for 30 years. She is a pioneer, way ahead of her time. And she teaches 4 grades, first through 4th grade, 3 or 4 kids per grade. And they go 3 mornings a week. And she has nailed it. It's a really effective, wonderful system. And then there's some home things they do each day. And then on Wednesdays, our kids all went to this co-op that covered music, art, science, and phys ed or gym. So that filled things out for us. So we did that for all of our children, 1st through 4th grade. And then from there, our oldest 3 went to the public middle school, which started in 5th grade, and the high school also. And then COVID hit, and that changed everything. Before that, I always said, I am an imposter in the homeschool world because I don't truly homeschool my children. I just outsource it, and I have chosen this one. The government considers it homeschooling, so I have to register. I have to file an affidavit in Pennsylvania every year saying, yeah, I'm homeschooling, and I have to turn in objectives, things like that, saying what I'm going to cover. Every state is different. Pennsylvania is actually one of the most highly regulated states in America as far as homeschooling goes. So when COVID hit, we finished out the year at the public school, and I was like, I can do better than this. So, and I figured the next year it would be in and out of school, and schools would be closed or, in person and then virtual. So I was like, all right, here we go. Let's do this for real. So then I did truly homeschooling, and it was fun. It's a lot of work. So it worked for a couple years, but at that time, there was a woman who was taking the model, the micro school model. She and her husband are both educators, international educators, and they really appreciate that micro school model. And they have some different things that they wanted to implement. So they started a one-room schoolhouse in literally what used to be like in Amish country. I don't know if you're familiar with, the Amish here in America. It was an Amish schoolhouse that is on their property. So they rehabbed it and turned it into a learning lab, it's called. And it was a micro school for 5th through 8th grade. So my kids went there, and my youngest will still be there next year. And then So my older ones have graduated. And so next year I'll have one at the Learning Lab, one at the public high school. He wants to play football and go to the public high school. And then my older ones are done. So we've done all kinds of things. And it's like every year I
was going to say, what a large amount of experience that you've got.
Yeah. Sometimes I envy the people who just do the same thing every year with all their kids and they just don't even reevaluate it. No decision making of what are we going to do next year? So every year we're like, well, what's best for this kid? And it's very individualized. And that will segue into the next thing. Homeschooling really allows a very individualized education.
All right. Well, let's dig in a little bit more because you've already mentioned micro schools, co-ops, learning labs. When I picture homeschooling, I'm picturing a mum or dad teaching their own kids all day, every day at home on their own. And I think I'm learning that is a one way, but that's only one way. So tell us how does it all work?
This all varies very much per state. In America, everyone has the right to homeschool. That is, I think, essentially federally mandated. Anybody can homeschool their children, but states are given the rights to regulate that and determine the requirements for each state. And then the school districts also have a little bit of control in that they can allow certain things, homeschoolers to use certain resources or not. We live in a very homeschool friendly school district, so we've gotten a lot of support here. We can use the music program. We can send our kids for orchestra, band, choir. Kids can play at the school. In our school district, you can take up to 2 classes per semester as a homeschooler. So you can come on campus and take 2 courses and not enroll as a homeschooler. I mean, not enroll as a student, but rather use it to supplement your homeschool curriculum. So in Pennsylvania, we have to, in the summer, July, submit what's called an affidavit. Every state has something different and a different term for it. And some states have nothing. Some states you can just homeschool your kids and not tell them anything. Right. So in Pennsylvania, you have a form you need to submit to the school district, and then you need to outline your objectives for the year, the learning objectives. It can be very vague or it can be very specific. We get the gamut. Some of that might be moderated a little bit more by the school district. I'm not familiar with all school districts, but I know in our school district, I can get away with keeping it pretty vague and they don't question it. Then this is the part that a lot of people don't know about. You hire an evaluator to come at the end of the school year and do an evaluation with each of your children. So this evaluator has to be a certified teacher, licensed and certified teacher, and they come and, in my case, I think we usually do half-hour evaluations. We keep a portfolio throughout the year. Until about 5 or 7 years ago, the school district used to collect our portfolio. We would give a giant 3-ring binder at the end of the school year to the office at the school district. As you can imagine, as homeschooling got more popular, nobody wants to look at that anymore. Who's got the time? So they changed the law that now you don't have to turn that into the school district. You show that to your evaluator. There are requirements for standardized testing in 3rd, 5th, 8th, 12th grade, I think. And your evaluator keeps track of things, asks your kid some questions, has them read some things, do some reading comprehension. Some evaluators do a lot, some evaluators do very little. But then the evaluator fills out a form certifying that that child has completed an appropriate education for that school year. Then the parent turns that one form into the school district and boom, that's it. You're done. So typically have to hire an evaluator, but it's not very expensive. It's under $100. And that's all there is to it in Pennsylvania. Some have much easier standards, even less that you have to do. In fact, I just compiled a document and I'm hoping to put it on my website. I went through the entire, and in all through the states of America and compiled some different facts about the different states. And what I'm finding, this is gaining huge momentum in America, is more and more states are funding home education. So they're creating education savings accounts, kind of like health savings accounts, so that you can, I don't know if you have those in Australia, but here you can use your funds. There's some tax protection for medical, for medical care. This is a little different in that it's given by the state, like almost like a voucher. I don't know if they don't call it vouchers. And you are allowed to use that fund to pay for your education. So what I'm finding, it's growing quickly. Several states just adopted it this current March of 2024, just of this year. A lot of it is geared toward low-income students or students with disabilities, which I think is exciting because those students with disabilities could really benefit from especially one-on-one music instruction. I have a couple of students that fit that bill, and I feel like I can make a huge difference in their life, but they're often through scholarships, things like that. They don't have the means to do it on their own. So I think if teachers are aware of this, they could really broaden their reach and really make a difference in that underprivileged or just neurodivergent or different learning disabilities, children that just have learning challenges. So those are some things.
So that's really of benefit for teachers to know about, because if parents are being given a sum of money that they can use on their child's homeschooling, then they're going to be more able to afford us as private educators. Right. That's really, really useful.
I think there are 17 states right now that have something, but it's growing every year. And looking at the statistics in America, 6% of school children are homeschooled. And that is a pretty substantial number. And it has just grown exponentially.
Alfred Music's piano resources have long been favourites of piano teachers and students alike, with a vast catalogue of popular methods, supplemental repertoire, masterworks, pop and more. This fall, Alfred Music is excited to continue its legacy of producing first-class piano resources with the release of 4 brand new books. For video game-loving students, Sagaland, video game-inspired solos by Elizabeth Swift for intermediate students that is sure to spark the imagination and excite all of your students. Sand Paintings, 16 piano pieces by the amazing Connor Chi, inspired by traditional Navajo sand paintings. Take the Stage, recital showstoppers for young beginners by Angela Marshall, and Rare Recital Treasures, an anthology of lesser-known teaching pieces selected and edited by Ingrid Clarfield and Kevin Chance. Exclusively for Topcast listeners, go to alfred.com/podcast and use the code TOPMUSIC at checkout to save 30% on these titles and everything else at alfred.com. Go check it out. So the bit that we need to talk about, I guess, is what happens from the parent saying, submitting that form and saying, I'm going to homeschool my child, and the evaluation happening at the end. That whole year in the middle, a parent can choose to, as you said, what did you say? I'm an imposter. I outsourced. So I didn't realize this was a thing. So homeschooling can be outsourced to other educators while you're still homeschooling. So, and that's where the co-ops come in, I think, and the micro schools. So could you just tell us about those? Have I got that right?
When you submit your affidavit or your form to homeschool your children, at least in Pennsylvania, you are the homeschool supervisor. So that is my role, homeschool supervisor. So from there, I can outsource to whoever I want. I have to have at least a high school.
Yeah, you're not the teacher, you're the supervisor.
Yes, the parent is the supervisor, not the teacher, and I can outsource to anyone. They don't have to be certified teachers. As a parent, I just have to have a high school diploma. So a parent has to have at least a high school diploma, prove that they have that in order to homeschool their children. So as the supervisor, you can essentially plan whatever you want for your child. You choose their curriculum. You can buy curriculum and you can go through it with your child, or you can have your parent or next door neighbor go through it with your child, or you can sign up for a co-op or a cooperative. We just call them co-ops around here. Or you can, in my case, essentially hire a tutor. So this micro school, essentially what's happening is that teacher is functioning as a tutor of my child. So there are so many ways. You can do college classes, you can do community classes, there's even a movement called unschooling. Have you heard of that? Unschooling?
I think I have. I'm not sure what it means.
That's a really interesting thing. And there were a lot of misconceptions. I had a lot of misconceptions about that term. Unschooling, done correctly and done well, is, I think, an amazing idea. It's the concept of letting your child's interests lead their learning. The belief at the foundation of this type of schooling is that children are inherently curious and natural learners. And if you give them the opportunities and the environment to learn, they will learn voraciously. And I have definitely witnessed that with my children. So in the unschooling realm, it's more about exposing your children to a lot of different activities, different schools of thought, different types of knowledge, and then the things that they are really interested in, just giving them tons and tons of opportunity, going to the library and getting lots of books, finding YouTube videos, going on field trips, just doing whatever you can to experience, to gain knowledge and practical skills in that area. So for example, I have a son who, by the time he was 6 years old, we could tell he was very mechanically gifted. I mean, for his 6th birthday, we bought him a leaf blower and a string trimmer, like a little, like, we forget the toys, give the kid the real thing. And so he would do small engine repair, and we'd watch YouTube videos, and people would give him old chainsaws or weed whackers. And we got him I found a old 4-wheeler for a couple $100 that wasn't running, and said, here, rather than signing you up for a class, take this apart and see what you can learn.
I used to be like that when I was a kid too.
Yeah. So it's doing that very deliberately. And in more time, you have more time to do that. And so now he's 16, and he's restored a couple trucks, and he's worked on tractors, and he's built a shop, and, so it just let your child lead the way. So in the musical realm, I have some students, then it's like they have time. The parents nurture that passion, and they just spend lots of time practicing and experiencing music in lots of different ways. So
we've got there's a group. Have you heard of Montessori schooling?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's the same child-directed learning kind of approach as well. That made me think of that.
Similar, yeah. That's more elementary level and play-based. And for the young child, this is kind of taking it to a higher level. Now, the unschoolers would still do math and language arts and science and history, but they kind of not sneak it, but a little bit. I'm going to use that term.
Yeah, they incorporate it into the interest, yeah. So tell me about music. Is music required by law, at least in your state and perhaps in others?
So in Pennsylvania, it specifies in the Pennsylvania Department of Education website that music is supposed to be part of the elementary and secondary curriculum. It does not specify anything beyond that. So it can be, a parent could say, yeah, my child listens to music, and the homeschool evaluator could say, check, done. So this is where it's up to the evaluator, up to the parent, but it's that language is there, and I think that is helpful and it helps to cultivate the arts in Pennsylvania. And there's a very strong musical culture and heritage here in Pennsylvania, at least in our community, and I think that helps to foster that.
So what are homeschool parents' options for that music study? Okay,
so there's a couple different things that I tend to see. Some families are very DIYers. They just, do it all themselves. And one of the parents plays an instrument, and they just teach their kid piano or guitar, or they have family music time, or they just incorporate it somehow into their life and their daily schedule, or they'll listen to classical music during whatever penmanship time. I don't know. And then sometimes some other people I know have taken an approach of they join with another family and do things, go to concerts, or have little jam sessions together or learn something together that one of the parents will teach both families' kids, or there's lots of ways that people are creative. Then, of course, one-on-one lessons. A lot of people in this community, and I think around the world, or at least around America, around the States, just do one-on-one piano lessons or music lessons with a teacher. That's very common. Then the homeschool co-ops, cooperatives, or called co-ops, that is another big one. Advantage to that is the social part. A lot of people look for co-ops for things that are much more advantageous to do in a group setting. So for example, phys ed or gym, it's nice, it's fun for a kid to be able to play sports with other kids, or, more than just themselves or their siblings. So co-ops often will have like a physical education offering. Music, that collaborative music making, they'll have choir or things like that. Sometimes even instrument ensembles. And then, of course, I mentioned this before, you can also go to the public school for music instruction. And some private schools also will allow you to, although there's usually a fee. So if you can just pay to go to a private school and have your child go to, choir or band or orchestra or whatever.
So these co-ops, am I picturing a physical building with rooms in it and an oval to run around in and everything? It sounds like a school.
In my case, both co-ops that I teach at happen in churches. So the churches are empty during the week. There are Sunday school classrooms. I teach music in a church sanctuary in both of these co-ops. So I have the stage. I have I had a drum set and, amplifiers and a sound system and a whole audio visual system. Well, and they both have some space in the back of the sanctuary behind all the benches where it's an open space where we can do games and things like that. So I can use a lot of the Kodai. We do a lot of singing game based instruction. So most of the co-ops around here, meeting in churches, is the most practical, and that's the most common because the churches are empty during the week and they love the way, they love being open to the community and serving the community. And it's pretty much a win-win. It's a little rough, having the one co-op I teach at, there's 400 students come in on a Tuesday. Or 400 people. So 400 people in a church using all the classrooms and all, stuff happens. It's a big sacrifice on the part of the church because stuff gets broken or lost or written on, or, it's definitely kind of, these churches have to have a little bit of a community minded or mission oriented or ministry outreach oriented mindset.
So it's possible, and we might talk about this a little bit later, that music teachers listening, rather than picturing themselves going to homeschoolers in their home or having a homeschooler come to their home, they could work in a co-op and do the teaching there if that's available in their area.
Definitely. And I would bet almost anywhere in America there is a homeschool co-op nearby. I mean, it's just becoming so common. So the way you find that is you Google your state homeschool association. So Pennsylvania Homeschool Association or, Georgia Homeschool Association, whatever your state is. And you start there with research, finding out what the different organizations are, get in contact with people, or you can just Google homeschool group near me or homeschool co-op near me, or, just something homeschool, whatever near me. And you'll often find way more than you thought. They're there. They're kind of under the, just in the woodwork. And once you're aware, you're like, wow, they're everywhere. I probably have a dozen of them within, 15-mile radius of me.
And so can you pitch yourself to these co-ops to say, hey, I'm a local music teacher, would love to help? How does that work?
The trickiest thing is getting in and just finding out who to talk to and building some sort of rapport with them. It helps tremendously, and this is a kind of which comes first, chicken or the egg. It helps tremendously to have some homeschooled students in order to get more homeschooled students, which is not a very helpful, that's where a lot of people get frustrated. But if you reach out and you just find out who is in charge of the co-op. Oftentimes there's like a steering, often there's a steering committee of some sort, or some sort of group.
Yeah, there must be a fairly significant organizing
Yeah,
group.
there's usually a couple moms that kind of keep things together. It's a lot of logistical planning. And then you just say, hey, I'm willing, I could run a children's choir, or I could do, you just offer, a class.
Like an add-on special something that you can offer. So, Ginny, I obviously think a lot when it comes to homeschools, one of the great advantages is teaching during the day capacity, which all teachers, it's like the holy grail in some ways, isn't it? Not always teaching after school. So I understand that is an advantage. Are there other advantages that you can think of?
Okay, so the main one that I see, this has been my experience, and this is a generalization. Of course, this is not always the case, but I have found that homeschoolers tend to be more dedicated, more disciplined, more motivated. Families tend to, again, not always, tend to have more structure and routine in their day, and students have time built in their day to practice. Not that school kids don't, but parents typically have the mindset of helping their kids pursue their passions, helping their children experience a wide variety of different experiences. It's a bad way of saying it. Helping them broaden their horizons and be very well-rounded. One of the things I remember saying to my kids in the early years, they were like, do I have to play violin? Why do I have to practice violin? Why do I have to play piano? And I said, well, it's just part of your education. You learn to read, you learn to write, you learn to do math, you learn to do you learn history, you learn science, and you learn to play an instrument. That's just part of your education. So a lot of people have that mindset, and so they'll prioritize it. Of course, not everyone, but I find that the people who do really do. And you can get some really dedicated students who can really excel and have time then to devote to that instrument, that art. Another potential advantage that I find is there are often multiple siblings. It's a little bit of a stereotype that homeschoolers have big families. That's of course not true, but often they do. If you're going to take all that time, if you're going to, one spouse is going to stay home and not work, and, you're going to homeschool, you're going to do all that extra work. You're going to do it for several children. Not that I do know homeschool families who have just one child and they still homeschool, but I find that it's more typical to have quite a large family. So you often get several students in one family. That's been the case for me quite a lot. You'll often find that homeschoolers are more flexible, which can be an advantage. And you'll find that homeschoolers are networkers, and so they will spread the word about you very, very rapidly. If you have a success with one homeschool family, they will let all their friends know, and they'll be calling you up.
So not only can you teach during the day, you have quality, I know we're generalizing, quality students who are committed and who have parents that are committed. They're not rushing between 10,000 different sports in 1 hour after school. I mean, this all sounds too good to be true. Are there any disadvantages or any things that teachers should be aware of?
Absolutely. Every rose has its thorns, I always say. So I don't feel like there's really any disadvantages to the daytime lessons. That's just fantastic. There's no no con to that one. The multiple siblings can be challenging if you don't have a place to accommodate the other siblings while you're teaching. That can be a challenge. I often see on, Facebook groups and things like that, nightmare stories about, while I was teaching Junior's sister and the mom were in the waiting room and, he drew all over, or he tore apart or he flushed this down there's all kinds of horror stories. So that can be challenging. The flexibility can be great, but it can also be very frustrating if you run a very tight studio. For example, homeschool families often vacation not when normal people vacation. They often value being able to go away for extended amounts of time, like in September or in April or early May. Off season when everybody else is still in school, the weather's starting to be nice. So they will take off for a couple weeks, and they value that because they're homeschooling so that they can have that flexibility. So if you are going to say, well, you have to pay for those 3 lessons you missed in September, even though everybody else got summer, flexible summertime, you might have to be a little flexible and kind of change your policies a little bit to accommodate homeschool families. And then another thing, I hear this a lot. It hasn't been my experience, so this could be a location issue. Homeschoolers, a lot of people say, are just really frugal and don't want to spend money on private lessons. And I understand that. When you homeschool, that usually means you're living on one income, because one of them is homeschooling the kids. It's hard to work and homeschool your children. And then in addition to that, you're paying for all the resources, all the curriculum, things like that you're home, and the field trips or everything that you're doing, you're paying for. So most families have some sort of budget, and it is pricey. Music education is pricey, one-on-one. So that's where I have found a great niche with offering classes during the day to groups of homeschoolers where it's, much less for them, but I get several of them, so it ends up being much more for me. That's been a fantastic way. I've been doing that probably on and off for, 6 or 8 years. This is how I run my classes. When I have time and mental energy and my schedule with my family permits it, I'll run a class or 2. And I usually do 6-week classes. At the end of those 6 weeks, if it's going well and my family is at a good spot and we're not too busy and I don't feel like I'm running around with like a chicken with my head cut off, I'll do another 6-week session. And if not, then if I feel like we're too busy, I just don't offer any more classes until I'm out of my busy season with my family. So that has been fantastic. And I don't know if there's any point in throwing numbers around, but I can run a 6-week course and bring in about $1,000 for essentially 6 hours of teaching, plus the prep and advertising and things like that. But once you're in that network, the advertising doesn't take too long. And once you've taught the class a couple times, you don't really have to do much at all. So I, can run a class a few times a year, and it's pretty easy money.
My goodness, I'm sure listeners their brains are going tick, 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 all these ideas coming through. I mean, it sounds like there's so many opportunities here, and it's flexible, and there are different options, ways to do it. So thank you so much for sharing all of that, Virginia. This has been so interesting, I think, particularly for someone on the other side of the world. Homeschooling is not a big thing over here, but it wouldn't surprise me if it becomes bigger. And it certainly has grown, I know, since the pandemic. And we now have online only schools that have popped up and things like that. So there is a lot of movement in education. What I thought would be fun to do would just be finish with just a few tips. You've mentioned how you can potentially get into co-ops, but other tips for just marketing generally to find homeschoolers. What would you say?
One would be, just make sure you're plugged into your local music teachers association. I think that can be helpful. Some areas of the country have a stronger local chapter than others. So in order to do that, you have to join MTNA here in the States, and then also subsequently your state organization. And then most areas have a local chapter. And they will often have a website, things like that people will find. And if you have your name and your contact information there, they can find you through that. That's not specific to homeschoolers. I would say Facebook has been my biggest resource. If you join Facebook groups for the homeschool communities in your area, I guarantee there are some. So on Facebook, the name of your city or town and the word homeschoolers, or your county, the word homeschoolers, and you'll find a lot of homeschool groups. The catch is oftentimes there are filter questions that you have to be a homeschooling parent in order to join. Sometimes you can message and you can get around that. I don't know. I homeschool, so it was easy for me. So sorry, I don't have a lot of advice on that. And then also joining your local Facebook groups. Like we have one that's called In Our School District Name. So let's say, in Twin Valley or in Middle Creek or in whatever school district, or whatever parent Facebook groups are in your area, or subdivisions, or your county or your town, whatever. Find the local Facebook groups And you have to watch. I'm sure people know if they're on Facebook, there are rules about what you can post and advertising of business, things like that. But a lot of community pages have things like, Fridays or Tuesdays, local business Tuesdays or local business Fridays, or, post your information on certain days, or you're allowed to post certain number of times a month. They just don't want business people, people promoting their small business all the time and spamming the Facebook group with that. So as long as you know what the rules are for your group, put your flyer out there. And if you have flyers, if you have daytime lessons or classes, include that word homeschoolers in there, and, make sure the homeschool community can find you. I think in the Facebook network, a lot of homeschool moms will be in the Facebook network because they're such strong networkers.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for those tips, Ginny. And look, I think we'll have to get you inside our Top Music Pro community to do some work with our members, because I know there's going to be more questions coming up. But for those people who are listening who would like to connect with you, is there anywhere that they can go to find out more or be in touch?
Sure. I'm kind of new to a lot of this. I've been so busy raising my family. I'm kind of slowly creeping up and popping my head out in the digital world. But I have a website, ginnymusic.com, Ginny music.com. And then I have a Facebook group where I post a lot of the resources that I'm creating or the things that I'm finding. Like I'll probably, when I get around to it, post the list of all the educational savings accounts by state in my Facebook group, which is Ginny Music on Facebook. And if you search me on YouTube, I have Ginny Music. I have some YouTube videos, some teaching related, some guitar, some classroom, some violin, all kinds of different things. I am a multi-instrumental teacher, so I just have some random things that maybe people will find helpful.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing so freely all this stuff that you've learned over so many years. You've got a wealth of experience, and I'm really honored that you've been able to come here and answer so many of those questions. So thanks for coming on the show today.
Sure thing. It's a pleasure.
Well, I hope today's episode has given you some ideas about whether the homeschool market might work for you and your students in your area. Of course, as we mentioned, it's different in every state of America. It's much bigger in America than other countries as far as I'm aware. But just looking online myself, there are homeschool organizations for most of the countries that we have members in. So I would love to continue this conversation. If you're a Top Music Pro member, jump into our community forums. Let's chat more about it. And as I said on the show, we're going to get Ginny in to run a bit of a workshop with our members. So come along to that if you can. And if you're not inside our membership, then find us on social media or send us an email. It would be fantastic to hear more about your own experience and ideas for potentially entering this market and how that's worked for you, some of the pros and cons, and any tips that you'd like to share. It'd be great to read those. So thanks so much for tuning in to today's show. I've really appreciated it, and I hope you've got lots out of it. Now, next week on the podcast, we get to meet 3 amazing composers, all working with Alfred to put out some new collections. Elizabeth Swift, the amazing Connor Chi, and Angela Marshall are all going to be visiting the podcast for a quick chat about what they've been creating recently. Until then, I'm Tim Topham, and you've been listening to the Topcast from topmusic.co. Can't wait to speak to you again this time next week. Bye-bye, everyone. How do you keep up to date with all the latest trends and research into music education? How do you connect with other teachers around the world and make sure your teaching stays fresh and relevant for students of all ages and stages, both now and into the future? I created our Top Music Pro membership to be the one-stop shop for music teaching resources, training, support, and community, and I'd love for you to come and join us inside. With over 40 comprehensive training courses, hundreds of teaching demonstrations and lesson plans, free monthly sheet music, discounts, and all the business and pedagogy support you could ever need, Top Music Pro is the community you've been looking for. If you're ready to level up your learning from the podcast and join thousands of other teachers in our global network, head over to topmusicpro.com today. If you enjoy this show and want to hear more of our work, be sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening today. For links and resources mentioned in this episode, visit us at topmusic.co/podcast or check out the show notes. I'm Tim Topham. Thank you so much for listening. Enjoy your week ahead, and I'll catch you next time.